I was like, I think I want to talk about that. Like all the different things and experiences I've had in wrestling and MMA and really in life that has caused me to not be on like plan A or plan B or, like even like plan G. I'm like probably on like plan X at this point in life. Um, but I'm really happy. And I think that all of us can really, you know, benefit from talking to each other and more discussion about the ups and downs in our lives and how each person navigates it and kind of get inspiration from everybody around us and how we cope with just even COVID, but different things that go on in our life that are out of our control. Um, and I think one of the biggest things that really has helped me with adapting to things is how I frame it in my mind. A lot of people when COVID first happened, they were like, I'm just gonna kind of put my life on pause, and kind of see what happens and stuff. And so, now being like almost a year into it, you really can't live being on pause because our lives are lived going forward and it's going, and there is no pause button and there's no rewind button, as we all know. So moving forward, like do we how do we look at this and turn this into something that not only we survive, but something that we honestly like attacked and triumphed. And I look at some of the different experiences I had, like the Olympic year, like most people don't know it. They know in 2004, I got an Olympic silver medal. But earlier that year, I had gotten like a small injury. I was out for a little bit. And when I came back to my national tournament, which is one of the biggest tournaments, especially an important Olympic year tournament, I got pinned in the finals of that tournament. And I had been very successful up until that point. I think it was like 4 years that I probably hadn't even lost a match nationally. Like I'd done really, really well. So I was easily projected as the person to come in, make the Olympic team, and potentially win the Olympics. And that pin kind of, it rocked me, like it was the first time in my life. At that point, I thought, I've invested so much hard work, so much sacrifice for over 10 years into this sport. And maybe there's a chance I just might not even make the Olympic team. Like, I had a really, really tough opponent. She was a multiple time world champ, world medalist, like one of the most decorated US women wrestlers. And she pinned me. Like, it just kind of, it hit me really hard. And the way that I coped with it, was I had to like look my fears right in the eye. I had to look and say, what happens if you don't make the Olympic team at all? Like, and I had to like sit with that and I had to accept like worst case scenario for me at the time. I was 23 and I took stock of things and I was like, I'll still be able to wrestle. I can still continue and try for another different quad. I'll have the people who love me, my friends, my family, and all the wonderful things that I have in my life. I'll still have those things, and it's not like it's a completely shut door. But once I stopped living in fear of that event, I think that that is what really opened me up so I could go into my Olympic trials and the Olympics without that ugly monster of fear kind of cropping up and kind of taking hold of me in my really vulnerable moments that year. And it was like that. It's such a really tough, stressful time. You have like the weight of the world on your shoulders when you make an Olympic team, especially if you're projected to medal. So, I was really vulnerable to, just a natural fear of things not going the way that I wanted. And I think also if you're listening to something like this, or if you're just a goal oriented person, we all operate in a world of shoulds, like if I do this and I do that, then I should have this result, and the truth is that like none of us are promised these things. We all do these things with the prospect of getting the things that we want, but that just isn't how life works. And I think that once you kind of understand the rules of life a little bit better and you accept that as part of it, it's not quite so crushing you're able to adapt faster when things deviate from your plan, um, and that's one of the things that I think is one of the crucial things that make up somebody who is not only a phenomenal athlete, but a super phenomenal person, which is the ability to change course and adapt to different circumstances and still keep their end goal like in mind. And if that's appropriate. And that was really good practice because whenever I went to the Olympics, coming through, I had to wrestle in my pool in order to get into the bracket system. And I had beat another girl. I beat her probably 10 times before. And I had a loss in the Olympics to somebody I'd never lost before. Like I was undeniably a better wrestler, but I just had like a fluke bad match. But I knew I was still coming through my pool. I was still going to get into the semifinals. And if I had not been able to adapt, and if I had carried that loss into my next match, I would have never made the Olympic finals. I would have not been able to have the mental toughness to let that match go, to understand that it happened, take from it whatever lessons I could learn and fully let it go so I could go into my semifinals match with like a clean slate. Then and that is exactly what I got. I rebounded and I got a pin in the Olympic semifinals to put me in the Olympic finals. And it just goes to show that like the more practice we have at looking at things like an adaptive situation and not holding it so tightly to our vision of what it should be, the more success that we can find. And the longer it takes you to do that, the more you're kind of spinning your own wheels and you may miss some opportunities. If I had taken longer and beat myself up more or lost confidence in myself, that next match, I wouldn't have been able to make it into the Olympic finals. I would have been still feeling sorry for myself. And I'm not saying don't be human. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't have feelings of disappointment. I'm just saying like give yourself a short period of time to be human, to allow those feelings to be what they are, and then restructure things, make a new game plan and still keep that fire alive inside of you. Because while like my wrestling is really good and arguably like exceptional because of my Olympic medal, my ability to adapt is not. I've met so many people in all different areas of life, all walks of life, who once they made the decision that they were just going to keep adapting and finding a way, they were equally as good as I was, or some even better. So it's really that is one of the things that we can choose to control in this life. And a good little quote that I heard before too was, imagine if a basketball player mourned every missed shot. And it's true. It's like if there's hundreds of shots shot every single game and they have how many games in a season, and he has to, or she has to immediately let go of that last try, that last basket, and focus exactly on the task at hand. So everybody has that capability too. All of us do. We let it go. We missed a shot, right on to the next. And I don't know how many people on here, I was talking before about how you frame life. And so I kind of started to view life like one of the adaptive tests. I don't know if you guys have taken those tests before. I think the GRE is that format where if you answer the first few questions correctly, you are then like bumped up to a far harder test. And if you answer the first few questions wrong, you're kind of like eased down into like an easier test. And I think that life is sort of like that, but it's more like a creative writing because you get to choose. It's not like there's right answer and wrong answer, but it's like a creative writing adaptive test. It's extremely difficult. You can choose different ways. And the choices you make along the way can either put you in a harder test or an easier test. And if you find yourself in an easier test, if your life is just completely easy, then you're probably not doing the things pushing yourself to your potential, and that's okay if that's what you want. But I imagine that the people who are on these different podcasts are more growth oriented people You want a little bit more. So I encourage everybody to, like, the way you frame it, and that you look at these different ups and downs, and the really windy road, and sometimes, off the beaten path ways that you have to get to your destinations. Look at that as the test, and that if it's really hard, you probably are you're aiming for something really high. You're aiming for something really good, and to keep being persistent towards that. And so I'm going to finish up a little bit more with a quote before I turn it over to questions. There's a quote that I said that I've heard before that is like something that really impressed me when I was very young, and I've kind of stuck with it and kept it with me. And I'm going to read it because I don't want to slaughter it. And it says, "It is not work that kills men. It is worry. Work is healthy. You can hardly put more upon a man than he can bear. Worry is rust upon the blade. It's not the revolution that destroys machinery, but the friction." And so with that being said, like, I think that our worry and our stress and our inability to change when different circumstances come up, and that is probably more what hinders us than the actual situation itself. And I also want to say this: it's not like when I told you I picked two examples where I was adaptive and things worked out well, but I've had situations where I can't turn around and say, "Oh, well, this happened and everything just worked out magically for the best." That's not exactly how things worked. Like, my brother was murdered when I was 18 years old, and I was just completely devastated. I lost my fiance in a car accident in 2003, 1 week after the Olympics. And I can't look at those situations and ever be like, well, that worked out, like, it just doesn't hold water. It doesn't really apply in those situations. But I can say this: because of the way that I viewed life, I could take some really terrible tragedies, things that, I was young, and we should all say that I shouldn't have had to go through those things and experience those things and have those losses, but I did. And my ability to adapt has helped me say, I can have some hard situations, but I don't have to have a hard life. I can have a good life, but I have to put my work boots on, and I've got to create that life. And even when more things come up, illness in my family, or, whatever, like, injuries in career, things that just don't work out, and you can't turn around and say, like, "Oh, well, that worked out for the better." I still fight to have a good life. I think we all have to continue to fight. And to me, that's what being adaptive during this year and all the years that we have is really all about. So if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and ask me.
So actually, we've got a couple questions. So I'm going to have Jeff join you.
Okay.
And Jeff is he's joining us from, you on there, Jeff? There you are. From Oregon.
Hi. How are we doing? I wasn't expecting to be on camera, so I didn't do my hair this morning.
I'm in my car with my children.
That was a great message. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Question I asked, and you kind of started to really answer it afterwards, but I asked, who's most influenced your life philosophy? Because you have a tremendous life philosophy, and I think a lot of people need to hear that. And or is it something you rather kind of learned on your own along the way? Where it's not
so like... No, I really love, like, stoicism. Like, it just kind of, like, the things that people have had to bear really influenced me. And then also in some of the toughest times of my life, I've read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and different stuff about, like, the Holocaust and Hotel Rwanda, and in places where they had just, like, unimaginable tragedy. And if they were able to find, some kind of happiness in this world, some kind of beauty, then it can be found, and I can find it too. And that really, like, I stick with that, like, man, some people can have small things go wrong and let that completely shape how they view life. And some people can have unbelievably terrible things go wrong and they still have a good life. So that it tells me that it's an attitude and a choice.
Very nice. I like that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
So Gina also had another question
Okay.
for going here. I think there she is.
Okay.
Hey, Gina.
Hello. I just actually wanted to hear a little bit more about your method of adapting and how you managed to stay motivated, what you did, and who you had around you to keep yourself motivated and focused on that goal, as you said.
Yeah. So I when I was young, I was like 18 years old whenever some of the biggest things happened to me with my brother. And I don't say that I actually had like a method. For me, what seemed to be, and I think everybody's different, you know, you have to first know yourself. I kind of withdrew into myself a little bit. I still go out and do things socially, but like I had more alone time, and I was journaling because I had to express these feelings that were like just overwhelming feelings, but I couldn't really say it to some of my friends because it was really hard for them to see me in so much pain. So I kind of just kept it to myself, but I journal so I could get some of those feelings out. But then, like I said, I read books, I sought knowledge, like other people have been through these things and they have adapted. And instead of trying to like completely start from scratch and reinvent the wheel, I tried to borrow from other people on how to cope. And then I just basically went through and like selected out which ways worked for me and which ways didn't. You know, like I have a real hard time with people like feeling sorry for me and things like that. And it actually would like ignite anger inside of me. But I've met people who, as soon as a tragedy happens, if they surround themselves with like family and friends and have like physical comfort and emotional comfort, that's exactly what they need. So I think life in part is a whole entire long study in figuring out yourself and then trying to like meet those needs as quickly as possible to be able to get the things done that you really want. And that could be like a goal like I did have with like the Olympics, but it could be I wanted to be a mom, you know, like I wanted to have a nice family. I wanted to have a supportive partner. And so I didn't stop until I found those things. If that answers the question.
I think she muted herself again. So,
Okay.
so you just mentioned about setting goals, and for someone that is kind of new to this realm as an athlete, you know, an elite athlete like yourself, you know, goal setting is incredibly important. What are some of the things that you do when you set a goal? What are some of the thought processes you go through?
So I've actually approached goals in two different ways. When I was younger, I really did. I had no idea there was no women's wrestling in the Olympics. I just did it in high school. And when I first started, there was only one college that offered women's wrestling by the time my senior year came around. So I really was almost like I was climbing a humongous staircase, but in my head, there was just one step in front of me, and there was one step in more, and then one step more. So I made it to the Olympics before the Olympics was even, you know, a thought in my mind, by just taking things one step at a time, of trying to be better than I was the day before. And that worked really, really well for me. And then I've tried it on the other way, where later in my life, I set for myself like a bigger goal. And then I went backwards and I looked at all the smaller goals that I had to reach in order to reach that bigger goal. So either way, I think whether you focus on the smaller steps, to not get overwhelmed by the really large goal, or if you see the large goal as this big prize, you know, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and then you just go one step at a time. It really depends on the person. But in counseling, like, so I went to school for mental health counseling. So I have my master's degree in that. And my professor, as she was helping clients through some of the hardest things they ever had to experience, she'd say, "How do you eat an elephant?" And she's like, "One bite at a time." And I'm like, that is just, it's really wise, you know, like thinking about eating an elephant is overwhelming. But if you think about it one bite at a time, it's not at all impossible. So I think that that really like helped me in the right direction towards my goals.
Yeah. And I think I found a fun little fact about you. Were you also the first woman to, sorry, I have someone else coming
It's
in,
okay.
to receive a silver medal for wrestling?
Yes.
That was
Yep. So
about you today.
yeah.
Or a couple of weeks ago, actually. So that's really cool. And I'm guessing you have a pretty good support system and accountability. We talk a lot about accountability in this group too. Just both the positive, you know, the we need that support, we need that love, we need that encouragement. We also need those few people that are like, hey, I thought you said you were going to
Yeah.
whatever. How important is that for you as well to be, you know, an Olympic medalist and to be, you know, a professional athlete?
Yes. And that's what my coaches are there for. And then I also have people in my life that are like, I know a professional football player, it's Leonard Wheeler. And he he told me that he, to this day, he stopped playing football a while ago, but he has mentors that keep him on track business wise and everything. And he still sets goals. And then he was that for me. Like if I said anything, he would call me out in a heartbeat and I'd be like, oh, you're right. You know, so like I have people in my life who are like gentle and caring and they want the best for me, but they're like, I think you're doing things below your potential. You have a lot more that you can give. And I'm like, how do I argue with that? Like, you're right. I'm a slacker. Dang it.
There we go. Jeff has another question, actually.
Okay.
This is kind of a philosophical question, and it's one I've been asked myself, and it's kind of interesting to hear how people answer it. But if you could go back in time and change one thing in your life, what would you change?
And, you know, I've thought a lot about that because I've had some really, really tough things. And once I had children, all of that changed. And I think now the fact that I have these two particular children, I'd have to say that I had changed nothing. And only being because if I change one thing about my life, I change who my partner is, I change where I am in life, and I change the children, the sperm that met the egg, all of that changes. And I wouldn't give my children up for anything. So even as much as I've been through, I would change nothing because I'd rather build and love the life that I have right now than not have them.
If I could have bet on an answer, I knew that was the answer you would give. It's from your philosophy, and that's the exact same way I've answered it. And I love that answer because it's true. You know, you can't, if you change one thing in your past, there's that butterfly effect, and you are not who you were. You know, I've struggled with that with my own kids. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, if I had not done all the things that I've done in my life, I would not be here, and these kids would not be who they are. So that's
And
a beautiful philosophy.
there's no guarantee. You think you'd be happier, but you change one thing, say I become the gold medalist. I might be insanely unhappy. I might be a drug addict. I might be you know, like alone and without my children. And I mean, like, you don't know. We all think that if we change one thing, we'll be happier, but we could have gone a completely different direction. There's people who win the lottery and they destroy their lives and they're divorced and, you know, bankrupt in 5 years or, you know, like, so
Yeah.
I think that you're better off starting where you are and building from that.
Great answer.
Dina,
Thank you.
question for you as well.
Yes. So what advice would you give to athletes who are just coming out of high school? I have a young niece who is graduating this year, and she took off with her wrestling in her high school. It was pretty amazing to see her really get into it as much as she did. And then I have a couple of nephews who
Yeah.
wrestle alongside of her. So what advice would you give to some of those athletes that are just now graduating?
So what I would say is to pick big things to focus on that you want to change. Like, say the biggest thing that is stopping you from having success in a match, and it could be your own offense, it could be defense, it could be your mental self-talk, you know, things like that, and start to work on that. And what all athletes do is we start with the largest problems and we whittle our way down to where we're eventually only tweaking and fine tuning. That's the process for all of us. So look at your wrestling and look at the biggest holes, whether it's your offense or defense, and just go to work on those every single day. And then eventually that won't be a problem and you'll find a new problem. And it's just a constant cycle of problem solving until you're really, really great at what you do.
And
Thanks.
just
Great advice.
with wrestling, Sarah is actually one of the key folks that is working with Sally Roberts, who is one of our sponsors for this event too, Wrestle Like a Girl. And their team is empowering women through sports and working towards getting, I'll let Sally speak on that actually.
Well, thank you for having me. Listen, my plane just landed. I'm in PA, Sarah. And I definitely told the pilot that he needed to hurry so that I could get here, so that I could be online when you got here.
I'm sure he listened.
He did. He just said, ma'am, keep your mask up. So I did. So yeah, I'm Sarah Roberts. Sarah's my friend. I'm the founder and CEO of Wrestle Like a Girl. And our vision is to create a world where women are wrestling worldwide. And our mission is to empower girls and women using the sport of wrestling to become leaders in life, because we know that the more opportunities girls get to wrestle, the more they get to learn how to navigate life and its challenges. And along the way, they get to own their sense of self, their space, their voice, their bodies. So thank you, Sandy, for having me and for hosting this. And thank you, Sarah, for joining.
So as far as you did speak about failure, Sarah, and how you just have to, your mindset really determines you can get stuck there, you can move on. What advice would you give to somebody that just feels like every time they turn around? So again, this is a lot of folks in this group have struggled with their weight or nutrition and tried lots of things over and over, maybe have lost weight and then gained it all back, and then they feel like they're starting from ground zero again. And with my clients, I talk a lot about failure being a good thing. You can't grow in like lifting until you get to failure in an exercise, for example. And it's where when you fail, it's when the growth starts. But in failure in general, what are some key points that you would just encourage people with?
Well, I guess the thing I would say is that like failure, whether you're aiming for something big or or problems arising, is not unique to anybody. I don't think that I know one person at all who doesn't have problems. I heard this quote before. It's like, the problem isn't that we have problems. It's that we have a problem with the fact that there are problems. And that, I know it sounds like really confusing, but what it's saying is that stop thinking that there aren't supposed to be problems. And if you stop looking at it like that, you're supposed to have this clear-cut path and that things are supposed to, once you decide on something, that the doorways are supposed to magically open, then you understand that that's okay. And that's not something that every single other person has not experienced. I think that most people, when they find community in that, they don't feel like they're the only one who has had these experiences and is pushing through it. And I think that, like I said before, leaning on other people, and we encourage each other. So I think that would help out the most, that like, of course there's failure, of course, but they're small failures and they're not overall failures. They're, they're little setbacks. The big failure is something completely different.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm just gonna make sure nobody else has any other questions here. Gina asked, what university did you attend?
So my first year, I went to the one women's college that was available, University of Minnesota Morris, but I transferred to Lock Haven University and wrestled on a guys team for the next 3.5 years.
And what are your future goals?
Okay, so I would like to continue fighting until I eventually can become UFC champion. And then after that, I will start doing jiu-jitsu because, well, I already kind of do jiu-jitsu, but just for the training and MMA. And I think I might go back and get my doctorate as well.
In psychology, or?
You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet. So I don't know what future Sarah's going to want. I never plan on doing MMA. So I'm like 10 years deep in that, 11 years. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to chat with everybody tonight and share your story and encourage people and answer a bunch of questions for everybody. It was a pleasure to get to see you, and thank you for escaping to your car.
No problem.
I think I had not recorded the meeting yet. When Sarah and I first got on, she's like, sorry, I have to do this in my car. My 2-year-old just woke up from a nap, and yeah, it's not going to work inside. Everyone has real life, and that's just beautiful to see. So.
All right. Thank you.
Sarah.
You.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.